The day it started, it was raining. Not a dramatic storm. Not something movie-like or poetic, just the kind of soft drizzle that seems to settle into your skin and remind you of every hollow part of your life. Jake Monroe had just moved into a third-floor apartment in an aging building in Cincinnati, Ohio. He had no one to greet him, no one to help unpack boxes. At 31, Jake was single, solitary, and newly unemployed. The apartment was cheap, too cheap. It had one bedroom, a narrow kitchen with chipped counters, and a single bathroom with a vintage pedestal sink and an old rectangular mirror with a bronze frame bolted into the wall. That mirror would become the center of everything. But at the time, Jake just looked at it and muttered something like, "At least I don't have to buy one." He had always been a bit of a loner, though not by choice. After his parents died in a car accident 5 years ago, he had pulled away from the handful of friends he had. Then came the layoffs at the logistics company where he worked. What followed were weeks of quiet job searching, restless sleep, and now, this move into a rundown place with walls thin enough to hear the neighbors' TV through. It happened the second night. Jake was brushing his teeth, half asleep, leaning toward the mirror. His tired eyes locked onto their reflection without much thought. His own face stared back, sleepy, pale, and gaunt from weeks of stress. He turned off the water, wiped his mouth, and was just about to turn when he saw it. His reflection blinked. But Jake hadn't. He froze. The toothbrush still in his hand, he leaned closer. His heart began to pound, slow and heavy, the way it does when your body realizes something before your brain does. He blinked deliberately. The reflection matched it. Then he stood completely still for a few seconds, trying to rationalize. "You're just tired," he whispered to himself. He walked out of the bathroom, but the unease followed him like the smell of burnt toast. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his own face staring back at him, not blinking at the same time, not moving in sync. He chalked it up to exhaustion, too many late nights, and the pressure of everything that had gone wrong in the past year. The next day, Jake avoided the mirror. He showered with the door ajar and toweled off without glancing in that direction. It felt silly, childish even, but there was a growing knot in his stomach that wouldn't let go. By evening, he found himself pacing around the apartment, his phone untouched, the TV droning in the background with some crime documentary he wasn't really watching. He poured himself a drink. One became two, then three. Drunk and annoyed at himself, he stomped back into the bathroom. "You're being ridiculous," he slurred. He stood in front of the mirror, staring at himself hard. He made exaggerated movements, tilting his head, waving his hands, sticking out his tongue. The reflection matched him, every time. Then he squinted and leaned forward. "See," he muttered, laughing nervously. "Nothing. Just you." And then it blinked again. Just a split second earlier than he did. Jake stumbled back, hitting the towel rack and nearly knocking it off the wall. His breath caught in his throat. The laugh died in his mouth. The room felt colder than it had seconds ago. The light above the mirror flickered faintly, just once. "Nope. Nope, nope, nope," he whispered, backing out of the room and shutting the door. He didn't sleep that night either. By the third day, Jake was unraveling. He tried replacing the mirror, but it wouldn't come off the wall. He unscrewed the bolts, but they seemed fused with the metal frame. He tried covering it with a sheet, but the fabric kept sliding off, even after he taped it at the corners. He considered breaking it, smashing it outright, but something inside him warned against it. Something primal, buried deep in his chest. Like the instinct that tells you not to look under your bed at night, even when you know it's empty. Instead, Jake began avoiding the bathroom entirely. He started using the gym's locker room to shower and brush his teeth. He peed in a water bottle when he could, and only used the toilet when absolutely necessary, and even then, he didn't look at the mirror. Not directly. He tried to tell someone. He called his friend Eric, a college buddy he hadn't spoken to in over a year. "Hey man, weird question," Jake said, trying to sound casual. Eric laughed. "Okay, shoot. Have you ever seen something wrong with your reflection?" There was a long pause. "Like what?" "Like, it doesn't copy you exactly. It blinks when you don't. or moves wrong, or stares at you like it's not you. Jake heard Eric exhale slowly. Are you okay, man?
Yeah.
Yeah, just wondering. You sure?
Yeah.
Never mind. Just sleep deprived. He hung up before Eric could push further. Days blurred together. Jake stopped leaving the apartment except for the gym. He turned all the other mirrors around, unplugged anything with a reflective surface, and even removed the glass from picture frames. Still, he could feel it. Watching. Waiting. The moment he stepped into the bathroom, it was like he was no longer alone. One night, after nearly a week of this, Jake decided to test it. He set up his phone outside the bathroom door, angled just so it could record his reflection through the mirror's angle. He left the door open slightly, giving it a perfect line of sight. Then he stood inside and stared at the mirror, stone still, for 20 minutes. He didn't move. He barely breathed. Then he reviewed the footage. Most of it was normal. Just him, standing like an idiot. But in the middle, around the 12-minute mark, his reflection blinked. Jake didn't. He played it back again. The same thing. It was real. His throat dried out and he dropped the phone on the floor. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. No cars, no footsteps from upstairs, no buzz from the fridge, just dead air. He felt like if he spoke too loud, something would answer back. That night, Jake had a dream. In it, he was brushing his teeth in front of the mirror. Everything was normal at first. Then the reflection smiled. A wide, unnatural grin. Its eyes stayed open while Jake blinked. Then, slowly, it leaned forward, pressing its forehead against the inside of the mirror. Jake did the same, unable to stop himself. The reflection whispered, "You're not real." He woke up screaming. Sweat drenched his shirt. His sheets were twisted around his legs like vines. He stumbled to the sink to splash water on his face, but stopped himself at the door. He couldn't go in. It was no longer about the mirror blinking. It was deeper than that. The reflection had presence now, like it was watching from the other side, waiting,
Studying.
mimicking. And Jake was beginning to feel like he wasn't the original anymore. He began seeing things outside the bathroom. A flicker in the microwave door. A twitch in the screen reflection when his laptop was off. In the puddles outside during a rainy walk to the store, his reflection lingered just a second longer than it should have. It felt like something was following him through every reflection, inching closer. Then one morning, Jake woke up to find a message, written on his bathroom mirror in condensation. "Let me in." Jake hadn't used the shower in days. He ran. Out the door, down the stairwell, into the street. He didn't even lock his door. He just ran until his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto a park bench miles away. When he finally caught his breath, he took out his phone to call anyone, but the screen reflected his face. And his face smiled. Jake dropped the phone. That night, he checked into a cheap motel, one without mirrors. He stayed awake until dawn, lights on, TV volume low for comfort. But even then, the windows reflected his image faintly. And the reflection blinked first. Jake spent 3 days in the motel, each hour stretching endlessly as he avoided anything that could show him his own face. He taped cardboard over the television screen and kept the lights dim to avoid catching glimpses in the window. He ate stale vending machine snacks and drank lukewarm soda to avoid going outside. But every night, as he lay in the hard bed with the coarse sheets, he felt watched. It was a constant sense of something lingering just beyond his sight, waiting in the thin reflections of the room's surfaces, the glossy table, the faucet, even the metal door handle. And every night, he dreamed of his reflection whispering, "You don't belong here." On the third night, Jake decided to leave the city altogether. He packed what little he had in a duffel bag and paid in cash at the front desk to avoid leaving a paper trail. He rented a beat-up sedan from a sketchy lot, figuring if he got far enough away, he could outrun whatever had latched onto him. As he drove out of Cincinnati, the city lights faded and the empty interstate stretched before him like an invitation to freedom. But every mile marker felt like a countdown, not an escape. He stopped for gas 2 hours south, at a lonely station surrounded by fog-shrouded fields. In the bathroom, he kept his eyes down, focused on the cracked tiles. But as he turned to leave, he accidentally caught his reflection in the scratched metal of the paper towel dispenser. It grinned. His feet rooted to the floor as cold terror pulsed through him. The reflection leaned forward, almost pressing against the thin layer of metal, and mouthed the words, "Almost there." Jake bolted out of the restroom and into the night, heart slamming in his chest. The old man at the counter gave him a suspicious look, but Jake didn't stop. He jumped in the car and peeled out of the parking lot, tires squealing on the wet asphalt. He didn't care that the gas pump was still running or that he'd nearly left his wallet behind. He just needed distance. He drove until sunrise, until his eyelids drooped with exhaustion. He pulled off the highway into a dense forest, following a dirt road until he found a small cabin marked for rent. There was no sign of life, no neighboring houses, just woods, mist, and silence. The cabin owner was an old woman with thin white hair and eyes that never quite focused on him. She didn't ask questions. She took his cash, handed him the key, and shuffled back to her house without another word. Inside the cabin, Jake was relieved to find no mirrors at all. The bathroom had an old wooden cabinet where a mirror once was, but now stood empty. He moved around slowly, half expecting his reflection to appear on the dark window panes, but the thick curtains kept the outside world at bay. He finally allowed himself to breathe, to think maybe, just maybe, he'd gotten away. The first 2 days in the cabin were quiet. He cooked simple meals on the rusted stove and read books he found stacked by the fireplace. He dared to hope. The oppressive sense of being watched receded to a dull paranoia, something he could almost ignore. But on the third night, it started again. A soft tapping came from the bathroom. Jake froze in the armchair where he had been dozing, ears straining to confirm the sound. Tap, tap, tap. It was slow and deliberate, not the random creaks of an old building. He stood, picked up the iron poker from the fireplace, and crept to the bathroom door. The tapping stopped when he placed his hand on the knob. He swallowed hard and pushed it open. The dark bathroom was empty, the empty mirror frame staring back, like an open wound. He stepped inside, sweeping the poker into every corner. Nothing. He turned to leave, but a cold draft washed over him. Then he heard his own voice behind him whisper, "Jake." He spun around. The mirror frame shimmered faintly, as if a thin sheet of water had filled it for just a second. In that ripple, he saw himself. But it wasn't quite him. The reflection was grinning again, eyes wide and unblinking, face lit from an impossible source. It raised a hand and beckoned. Jake stumbled back out of the bathroom, slamming the door. He braced a chair under the knob and fell to the floor, hugging his knees. He stayed there until morning, eyes locked on the door, waiting for it to burst open. When sunlight finally trickled through the cabin windows, Jake felt a hollow kind of relief. He stood up on shaky legs, the floorboards cold beneath his bare feet. He knew he couldn't stay any longer. Whatever this was, it wasn't confined to a city or a building. It was inside every reflection he might ever see. As he packed, he found a scrap of paper in the kitchen drawer with a local handyman's number scribbled on it. Desperate, he called. An hour later, a man named Bill arrived in an old pickup. He was rugged, middle-aged, with kind eyes that squinted at Jake's wild, exhausted look. Jake lied, saying he needed help fixing a broken mirror frame and didn't want to replace with another mirror, just sealed up. Bill shrugged and went to work, nailing a thick wooden panel over the empty frame. Bill's voice was calm as he worked. "People don't like mirrors out here. Say they show more than they should." He glanced at Jake. "You seen something you shouldn't?" Jake's throat went dry, and he could only nod. When Bill left, Jake felt safer. The mirror was gone. He stayed awake until night fell, then collapsed into a deep, dreamless sleep for the first time in weeks. But the peace didn't last. He woke to the sound of whispering. At first, it was like the hiss of wind through the trees, but then it resolved into words. His own voice, repeating the same sentence over and over. "I'm here. Let me in. I'm here. Let me in." He sat up, heart slamming against his ribs, and scanned the cabin. The windows were dark, the woods beyond impenetrable. He grabbed a flashlight and swept it across the room. Nothing. Then he heard a soft scratching. He followed it to the kitchen and saw condensation forming on the window, letters appearing as if traced by an invisible finger. "Let me in." He screamed, the sound raw and jagged, and grabbed the curtain, yanking it closed. He backed away, bumping into the table. The scratching moved to the bedroom window. Then the bathroom door creaked, even though it was still blocked by the chair. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, echoing with his own voice until it sounded like a chorus. Jake ran outside into the night, the cold air biting into his skin. He turned in circles, flashlight beam cutting through the fog, but the forest seemed to close in on him. Every puddle reflected his face. Every droplet of dew on the leaves glistened with tiny mirrors. And in every reflection, he saw that same mocking grin. He fled into the woods, branches whipping at his face, feet sinking into soft earth. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stop. He tripped and fell, landing in a shallow stream. As he scrambled to his feet, his reflection stared up at him from the rippling water. It blinked first. The reflection's eyes narrowed, its grin widening until it looked inhuman. Then it spoke in a voice that rippled through the stream. "You can't run." Jake screamed and smashed the water with his fists, but every splash only made 1,000 tiny reflections, each one showing that terrible face. He crawled out of the stream and kept running, deeper into the forest, until he collapsed against a moss-covered tree. He didn't know how long he lay there, panting, shivering. When he looked up, dawn light was filtering through the canopy. For a moment, the woods looked peaceful. Birds sang, a breeze stirred the leaves, and there were no whispers. He staggered to his feet and began walking back toward the cabin, hoping he could pack and leave before whatever this was found him again. But when he arrived, he found the cabin door hanging open. Inside, every reflective surface, pots, the faucet, a broken shard of glass from the lamp, was positioned perfectly to reflect him from every angle. His reflection stared at him from a dozen points in the room, each one grinning. Then they all spoke in unison, "We're here." The front door slammed shut behind him. The room darkened, the reflections growing brighter until they were the only light. They began moving out of sync, each reflection twitching, blinking at different times, smiling wider than was humanly possible. Jake fell to his knees, clutching his head, the voices pounding in his skull. The last thing he saw before blacking out was his own face stepping out of the nearest reflection, hand reaching for him with long, distorted fingers. When he awoke, the cabin was quiet. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Everything was in its place. The bathroom door stood ajar, the mirror frame still sealed with wood. For a moment, he thought it was all a nightmare. Then he saw his reflection in the dark screen of his phone lying next to him. It smiled first. Then it blinked. Jake screamed, but no sound came out. His reflection was still smiling, mouthing words he couldn't hear. He staggered outside, desperate for help. But when he passed a car parked on the road, he saw his reflection in the window, and it wasn't him. It was something wearing his face. As he ran, every car, every window, every piece of glass he passed showed his reflection, and every one of them watched him with gleeful eyes. They began whispering louder and louder, chanting a single word: "Mine. Mine. Mine." Jake fell to the ground, sobbing, the sound drowned out by the voices echoing in his mind. He realized the truth then. It didn't matter how far he ran, how many mirrors he smashed, how many windows he covered. It was inside him now, in every reflection he'd ever see. There would be no escape, no peace. His own image had become his prison. As the world around him blurred and the sky grew dark, Jake looked into the puddle by his feet. His reflection smiled, eyes filled with infinite darkness. And then it blinked.